So we were talking about
about repertoire. So that's you know, keeping it fresh though, man. I'll tell you, that's so. Like I'm at a place right now where I could really use an injection of like 10 or 12 new vehicles for the band.
Right.
And it gets to that point, but it's not easy, you know, coming up with it's basically a whole new show.
Right.
And so, you know, it's time maybe to make another record, which is always, you know, it really helps when you make a new record because you rejuvenate the whole thing and you basically have a new set or a new show. You know.
Now, you generally work, you pretty much seem to do a lot of your recordings with the same group of musicians, Steve Gomes on bass.
Yeah. Well, Severn Records, run by David Earl, a person who's been huge for my career, and a man with great ears and great skill as a producer, a great guitar player. He's a really good guitar player. So David Earl's concept with the Severn label, it was for some of the artists, not for all, but for several, for Daryl Newlish, for me, for even Kim Wilson when he came to the label, and Lou Pride, and several others, was to put together a kind of a house band,
right,
in the mold of a Stax or a High Records, where David, you know, had his go-to players that he felt really comfortable with and knew that they were eclectic enough and skilled enough to not to make the sound always the same, but to have guys that he really worked well with. So we had Rob Stupka from the Twin Cities on drums. Great that goes back to our discussion of Gary Primich. I mean, I was looking through my Gary Primich records, and
I think I first heard Rob play with Gary. I remember, and it was like I was going, God, this guy's incredible.
Yeah, and Rob is so, I mean, versatile. I mean, he could play that straight ahead stuff behind Gary, but then he could do stuff behind Daryl Newlish, which was straight up soul.
Yeah.
And anyway, so he had Rob on the drums, and he had Steve Gomes on a lot of the records, and Steve was kind of a co-producer and also a co-writer on a lot of the stuff. He would bring, I mean, Steve, he is a writing fool. I mean, he writes great songs. So, and then he had, in the guitar chair, he had like Johnny Moeller involved, which, in fairness to Daryl, Rob, Steve, and Johnny were Daryl's band.
Right, that was Texas Heat.
Yeah.
So,
but you know, they became this great session band for David.
Right.
And then he added other people. I mean, Willie Henderson came along with horn arrangements. Great Willie Henderson from Chicago, who did Tyrone Davis, If I Could Turn Back the Hands of Time, and Can I Change My Mind. Those were million sellers for Willie as a producer and arranger. And then on the keyboards, we had Benji Parecki and Kevin Anker from Indianapolis. So it became like this, a core unit. About 4 out of the last 5 records I did for Severn were with the Severn House Band, adding Alex Schultz on guitar. So David Earl's thing was, you know, I want to use my house band, but if my artist has a particular ringer that he wants to bring in, and in my case it was Alex, because Alex Schultz and I have made a lot of records together, and Alex produced my first record that Severn took.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Did You Ever Wonder was a record that Alex produced on me, and then Alex said, you know, this guy David Earl in Maryland might be interested, and then he was. Wow. And then David put that one out, but it was Alex's
baby. So you've been working with David for how long?
We did our first record in 05.
17 years.
Yeah, and the last record I did recorded in Memphis with the High Rhythm section. I got a grant from the Indianapolis Arts Council to go to Memphis. The original grant it's called an artist renewal grant. So they said, we want you to just go away from your day-to-day. Wow. We're gonna give you money to go away and like renew your creativity. And my thing was, I want to go to Memphis because I want to be where, you know, Memphis Soul was born, and Southern Soul, and then I spoke to Scott Bomar, and the great producer down in Memphis who just co-wrote William Bell's new single and produced a lot of great stuff. And I spoke to John Namath and other friends, and they said, "Man, while you're down in Memphis with this grant, why don't you?" They said to me, "You could hire some of the greats that are still there to make a record, like maybe make 3 or 4 tracks." So then I mentioned it to David Earl, and he said, "You know what, man? I'll match the grant, and why don't you make 10 tracks so we have a record?" Then I had to go back to the Arts Council and go, "You know, this thing, would it be all right if I don't just go down there and like sit back and listen to music and juke joints, and, you know, but if I actually make a record that'll be a commercial product?" Because that was a little outside of the grant. And they said, "Put it in an email, you have our blessing." And so they allowed me to go down, and so I ended up working with the high rhythm section, basically. So it was Charles Hodges, Leroy Hodges, Charles Hodges on Hammond, Leroy Hodges on bass, and Howard Grimes on drum. Basically, I had Al Green's band and Ann Peoples' band, Otis Clay's band, but without Teenie Hodges on guitar. And Joe Restivo had become kind of one of the go-to guys in Memphis. Great guitar player who kind of channels that
vibe,
Memphis vibe. He's in the Love Light Orchestra.
With John.
That's the guitar player. So he really has a great thing. And then I brought Kevin Anker from home, from Indianapolis, to join in this venture. We spent a week at Scott Bomar's studio, Electrophonic, on Main Street in downtown Memphis, and we made my most recent record, Real Street.
Man, I can't wait to hear it.
Well, that's been out. That's been out.
Oh, okay.
But I could turn it out for sure.
Okay, good.
Yep. So we did that. It was funny because we did a tune that Ken Sadak and Kevin Anker and I had written called Changes. It's the opening track. And when we were presenting it to the high rhythm section, you know, you always want to allude to some other tracks so they know, well, what's the vibe? So we said, it's kind of like Trying to Live My Life Without You, Otis Clay. And they go, oh, we were on that. Yeah, you know, so they're like, we know that group. And that kept happening.
That's amazing.
I mean, I brought another very obscure tune called Search Your Heart. And they had played on the original back in the day. So, that kept happening. But, you know, it's a small world, I guess, when you're that much a part of the fabric of a scene like the high rhythm section were, that if they weren't on the record you're talking about, they were at the session maybe listening to their buddy, or they were aware of it, you know.
That's amazing.
So I mean,
did you know Otis Clay pretty well?
Not really well. I knew him.
You know,
and Otis was the type of person, I think, that even if you knew him in passing, he made you feel
like you were a real friend.
And he looked you in the eye, and he you know, he was just one of the most, you know, beautiful spiritual people. And he sang background on one of my records. David Earl called him in because Willie Henderson was doing horns, and Willie Henderson and Otis were very close. And then when I actually was producing something for House of Blues label in Chicago, we did a tribute to Janis Joplin, and Otis was called in to do Piece of My Heart.
Wow.
The great Jerry Ragaboy classic. And which he killed. And
I bet.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful. And
that was Aretha's sister that did the original of that.
Oh,
Irma Franklin.
Irma Franklin.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh,
wasn't
wow.
it? Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, that was. And what a great. Yeah, the original.
The original
is amazing.
Yeah.
So Otis did that, and I brought in. I kind of assembled the band for that project, which was Kevin McHenry, Alex Schultz. I don't know. It was a bunch of Chicago guys, plus some friends that I brought in. And they cut behind Otis. So that was another experience I had with Otis Clay, in a professional setting. You know, I was producing that track for some reason. I ended up getting a call, and they said, could you put the band together? And the record was going to have Otis Clay, and it was going to have Coco Taylor, and Etta James did Ball and Chain, and
And did you say you produced this record?
I co-produced it.
Wow.
Although the Coco Taylor and the Lonnie Brooks tracks, Bruce Iglauer did.
Okay.
That was done separately.
That was done
He didn't want to come in
Right.
to this band that we had assembled.
Right.
But I produced the Otis Clay track. The other producer, Ira Antelis, who I knew through the Chicago production scene, he did a lot of jingle music.
Now, didn't you do jingles for a while?
Yeah. When I lived in Chicago, when I moved there, I started doing blues clubs.
Right.
And then one day I just got a call, and they said, "Can you come into the studio? We're doing a session." And I this was a world that I wasn't really aware of.
Right.
So I just showed up to the address, this fancy area near Michigan Avenue, all these nice buildings, and walk in, and there's this beautiful studio, and it was for a McDonald's commercial. I just had to sing, the good time, great taste of McDonald's or something.
Right.
And I did that, and the next thing I know, it's on the air, playing nationally on TV and everything. And then one thing led to another, and for a number of years, I was in that
world.
That world where you're getting called to do session work.
Wow.
And I always say, people say, "Oh, I'm a purist. I only do this. I only do that." A lot of the musicians I know, you're a gigger.
Yeah,
you get called to do a session,
Yeah.
and you get called to put a tuxedo on and,
Sure.
and croon at a wedding or whatever. I mean, I need to work.
Right.
And so the way I looked at it was, this is part of the way musicians are paid in this culture.
That's right.
So I did that. Yeah, I was doing that I did it for about 15 years.
Wow.
When I say that, I mean, I was active, like doing
Right.
a lot of work. If someone calls me right now, I'll go do it.
Right.
But it's just that phase.
But you were
gone.
kind of in that circle.
Exactly.
Yeah,
In
you
Chicago,
were in
the
circle.
production scene, I was in that.
Right.
And I was on a session one time that Sugar Blue was on.
Oh,
I
really?
was singing and he was blowing harp.
Huh.
And I was on commercials with, various people over the Skunk Baxter was on a commercial I did.
Wow.
Various people in Chicago. Sometimes in Chicago, like if they were doing a commercial and they wanted a bluesy feeling, well, you're in Chicago. They could call anyone.
Yeah.
So they had a great talent pool.
Sure. Of course.
So in that respect, they didn't need to call like session musicians
Right.
who are going to read a chart.
Right.
They just can call someone from the blues scene and say, "Hey,
Right.
dude, set up a groove and
Right.
we're going to be selling Cheerios over it,
Yeah.
whatever." I remember my friend Jimmy Thackeray said, "Oh, that's when I knew the demise of our genre was upon us, when I heard, macaroni and cheese being sold with blah 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 blah."
Right.
And I said, "Well, now hip hop
Yeah.
or is
Right.
in that. I mean, you can't escape it."
Well, and the thing is that it is popularity. It's kind of what comes with popularity.
Yeah, and we want our genre to be in the public
limelight.
consciousness
Yeah.
and
Right.
just
But you're right. You're right about what you were talking about earlier about how small the slice is of what it is we do. We're in this really kind of, it's almost like something like old country or bluegrass or something like that. It's not this giant thing like rock and roll or
right. I almost feel like whenever
or rap or something.
it's kind of like I feel I know you,
right,
because we are in the same kind
same
of
circle,
community, and we I'm hip to
Right.
records you've been on,
Right.
and you're hip to, if not records I've been on, then Sidemen that he plays
Well,
with Tad.
I kind of found out about you
know.
through Freund in
Right.
89 or 90.
Okay, right,
That's
because
kinda
Steve
how
and I go,
Yeah.
so far back. I came up, as a child of the 60s and listening to my brother's record collection.
Right.
And listening to, when I was coming up, it was, on the radio, Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, Eric Burden, the Beatles, the British
Right.
Invasion,
Right.
Motown, Stax, Bobby Darin. You still had the older.
You must be the same age as me.
I'm 66.
Yeah,
so I
we're
was
the
born
same
in
age.
56.
Yep.
So
We're
that
the
was
same
my
age.
that was my upbringing.
Yeah.
And that it's just kind of like, oh, I wanna sing.
Right. Yeah, I heard all the rock groups. That was kind of what got me into blues. Was I heard the psychedelic bands in San Francisco, And through them, I found out about all the blues guys.
Yeah, and of course, it
even though I heard it on the radio earlier.
Yeah.
I heard Slim Harpo and Jimmy Reed.
Oh, okay.
65 or something. When
I never got that dose.
It was only because it was on R&B radio.
Okay.
Yeah, for some reason.
Because what I was hearing, in New York City on, basically on AM radio then.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
You'd hear, the Tijuana Brass followed by, the Beatles, followed by the Supremes, followed by the Four Tops, followed by Bobby Darin. Those were pop records.
Yeah.
And it was very eclectic, really.
Right. Yeah, this was more R&B radio in LA.
We weren't hip to that level. That came later for me.
Right. I actually saw Buddy and Junior when I was 12. The very first concert I ever went to.
Wow, that explains a lot.
I mean, they were all these rock acts on it, but they had Buddy and Junior. They had Albert King, but they also had Country Joe and the Fish and the Mothers and the Birds.
That's a concert now.
Yeah. Woo. Big Brother and the Holding Company, all these groups.
And this was in
Pasadena, the Rose Bowl.
Nice. Yeah, Buddy and Junior were really happening back then.
They were really happening, but they were like dressed in sharkskin suits, and he was doing all his James Brown stuff, and I couldn't wrap my head around that at 12 years old.
Yeah, well, Junior. Yeah. He was, one thing about him, he was a very sparse harmonica player.
He was just great player.
Oh, I mean, I love his playing, but he would really, tasteful to a fault, like some tunes, like that famous Viet Cong blues on Vanguard, like the whole moment, the whole solo is like one note. Right. And that's like, okay, that's enough. Yeah. Power behind that.
Yeah.
They
were really kind of the first modern
blues. He had a lot of
blues
restraint. Yeah. I remember he told me that too. He said, sometimes the best thing you can do with that harp is lay it down.
Right.
Because now I don't know if that was a backward, if he was saying, stop playing, bro. You don't sound it. But I took it to mean restraint.
Right.
Like listening to the spaces, because I was in an Indiana band and we met at Teresa's.
Right.
We came up and came to Teresa's, and he had us come up and sit in, and he was real sweetheart and everything.
Yeah, he was a good guy, man.
Yeah, there's not a lot of them that I met that weren't. I mean, when I came to Chicago, the establishment blues players, I mean, there was nothing but welcoming. I mean, I didn't feel like ostracized or an outsider. A lot of musicians worry about their own employment, so they're not going to dish you. It's like, this dude might hire me.
Right.
I think he's not very good, but he might hire me. No, I mean, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's
musicians,
true. Yeah.
sidemen are generally going to be
gracious.
They're going to realize that, this guy might be one of the people who hires me 5, 8, 10 times a year.
Exactly.
In a community like Chicago, where there's a lot of work, and then there's a talent pool, and you end up working with everybody. Well,
that's what's interesting. I mean, one of the things I love about, hanging with the Cotton guys or you or, all the Chicago people, because I've always been fixated with Chicago. I mean, because of the blues. And it's like, you realize there's this, and it's the same in the Bay. We all work with each other.
Right.
Everyone knows everybody because of that.
That's a scene that's really just become so strong.
It's thriving.
I mean, with Kid Anderson and you
and Aki Kumar has had a lot to do with it.
And they've really injected
the South Bay. There's something that happened in the South Bay with when kids started doing the studio and Aki started doing like these jam sessions and stuff. It just kind of has blown up in terms of the amount of, and there's a lot of young people. Again, we're talking about young people. There's a lot of youngsters in the area that are really starting to kind of get out there. And
I'd really like to get out there and I don't know. I have a fantasy of getting with those guys and
with
doing some recording and in his studio set up because
they're perfect
the
for
stuff.
You.
I mean, it all is. You need to bring the goods. No matter who you're working with. You need to bring songs that can inspire the cats. Otherwise,
Right.
you know, just saying 12-bar blues, start on the 5 in the key of, you know,
Right,
B
it's
flat.
not really gonna get it.
You better be some
Yeah.
bad monster guy to just really get over that. You
Yeah.
have to have something.
Yeah.
But I would, you know, but the thing is, there are teams in different parts of the
Yeah.
world. Even,
That's right.
that you know, it'd be
Yeah.
fun to work with, and so
Yeah.
it gives you an incentive to, you know, get up every day and keep being creative.
Well, like we were talking about the thing about Europe, and I mean, it was interesting when you were talking about, you know, you were working with Erkan and his family and that group, and how working with a band over in Europe is different than bringing your own guys over. What would you say the difference is? Because I found that experience interesting too.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I mean, it has to be said that oftentimes it's a financial consideration.
Right.
Like there are tours or festivals that say, look, we love you, but we can't afford to fly your 5-man
guys,
unit
yeah,
out
right.
and house you and hotel you and feed you and have you here for a week. I mean, so, you know, and that sometimes gets involved with how big you are, what your stature is as an artist.
Right.
I mean, I'm at this place where sometimes you know, the festival is such that they want the whole thing.
Yeah.
But other times I will get proposals from folks over there. It's like, hey, we'd like to bring you, but we have a great group and they have backed many artists, and they will learn your stuff, and you know, you'll get there a day early, you'll rehearse. They're conversant in blue, you know,
Which it didn't used to be.
And some of
Yeah, it
these
didn't used
folks,
to be.
I mean, look, Kid Anderson is
he's from Norway.
Norwegian,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And
Igor Prado. Yeah.
Igor Prado is one of, you know, these up and coming. I have found that
Tommy Lino and them.
in Finland, they're great
musicians.
They're great musicians, and they're really wrapped up in American roots.
They sure
music.
are. Yeah.
And they can talk all day about, you know, the recordings and get deep into it.
Right.
They have a great appreciation for it, and they play the stuff for keeps. I mean,
they sure do.
I mean, I've heard Kim Wilson talk about some of the European musicians that he's hip to, and just totally give it up and say these cats are the real deal.
Yeah, they are.
And, you know, so it's not me saying it.
Right.
It's some of the people who are in the higher echelon who are saying, these cats can really play American blues well. So anyway,
my friend Wes Weston is
great harp player. Steve,
yeah.
My age is showing. There are some names that I really want to throw out of my European cohort.
The Suitcase Brothers.
They're
They're the other ones.
Yeah. I mean, but my Finnish friends who I just worked with, Jaska Prepula and Jukka Pavla, Janne Kulavara. I mean, and Tommy Leno and people like that. And then in Germany, the Blues Shacks, you know, the Alt Brothers, and just go on down the list.
Yeah.
The experience is really good because basically I have brothers over there that, you know, are really great friends of mine now. That I tour with occasionally. They learn, the Erkan Özdemir and his sons. Erkan is my agent, but he's also a great bass player. And he's put together a band that he can book me for a couple weeks and he can back me.
Right.
And he's wonderful. And Alberto Marsico, we were talking about, the Hammond player in Italy.
Yeah, I met him.
All these little cells.
Belgium, yeah.
I just did a record with Lars Kutschka, who's a German guitarist from Dresden. And he's a beautiful player.
Yeah.
He works a lot with Sherry Williams, and who's an American who goes over there to tour. So it's all part of making a living in this business for me.
And you know, here's what I like is when you're hanging with the European musicians, you get this real taste of the country that you don't get when you're in your insulated American band.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of a different.
That's true.
A different way to tour.
Yeah, it is. It's a great way to tour. I mean, even when you're an American band touring, your driver usually is that person who's going to help you with the locals. But and another thing is you hear the dirt on the Americans who were bad, who didn't treat the cats right over there,
which we love to hear.
You know, it's like, you got to watch your P's and Q's because you know. The next thing you know, these guys are like headlining festivals here.
Right.
You know, and you're like, can I work with you? You know, so yeah, I mean, it's all family.
Yeah.
I mean, I love it. I like the experience. It's a different animal than having a band that is one for all for one.
Right.
And that's fantastic too, and nothing can beat that cohesion and that strength and power walking out on the stage. And
well, that's what I really got from the Cotton guys hanging around with them, because they really are like, they are a band of brothers. I mean, these guys had worked together so much with James, and it was like, man, he knew how to put together a band.
And I'll tell you, man, you do that repertoire so solid. I mean,
wait till the night.
I know, but I saw it on video. I already heard you do like Creeper and it, you know, it's I mean, James Cotton, you know, was just, you know,
he was such a
one of the heavies ever.
Yeah.
Musician, not even harp player.
Yeah.
You know, and that you have brought his repertoire back, and that you're able to get.
I love championing you know, somebody like James,
really,
because
I really admire you for doing that.
Yeah, he was really my main. He was my main guy, man.
The last time I heard him was with Hubert Sumlin in Lucerne.
Right.
The Lucerne Blues Festival, and it was Hubert and James were up there together, and that was.
That's special.
That was
because those guys go back to being kids together.
Wow.
Yeah. In Arkansas and Mississippi.
Okay.
They were a team before Wolf.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They created the music, and they were the ones that put the breadcrumbs out for everybody to follow and to kind of try to figure this stuff out.
Well, thanks again, man.
Good talking with you.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear you tonight.
Likewise, man.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.